Now, 3 years ago, Ukraine's presidential elections descended into chaos amid allegations of vote rigging. Now there are many in the country who fear history could be repeating.
Yes, voting in this year's national elections begin in just a few hours' time, but international observers say they've already uncovered fraud and accusations of intimidation. Al Jazeera has two correspondents in Ukraine for Sunday's elections. In a moment we'll hear from Lawrence Lee in the eastern city of Donetsk. But first, Jonah looks at the final hours of campaigning from the country's capital, Kiev.
A final burst of campaigning. In orange, our Ukraine, the party loyal to pro-Western President Viktor Yushchenko. In blue, his longtime rival Viktor Yanukovych, the current Prime Minister, voice of Ukraine's Russian-speaking East. And Yulia Tymoshenko, the President's former orange ally turned populist and popular in opposition white. Frustratingly for voters, this election is more about personalities than policy. Who they are matters far more than what they do. Or what they don't do. Take football, for example. Ukraine is set to co-host the Euro 2012 finals with Poland. Olympijski Stadium in Kiev is the planned venue for the tournament's crowning moment, the final itself. For Ukraine, it will mean instant international recognition, thousands of visitors and massive investment. But the event is in jeopardy. At the heart of the problem, Ukraine's bickering politicians, competing business interests that support them, and rampant corruption nobody seems to be able to do anything about. European football officials are worried about a shopping centre under construction that blocks the stadium's exits. Unless it's removed, they say, Euro 2012 may have to go elsewhere. A senior Kiev journalist claims that the owner of the site paid handsome bribes for it. Those who took the bribes refused to pay them back, and the courts have been bribed to stay well clear.
Our politicians are not grown up enough to understand how big a chance this is for Ukraine. They spend all their time on things like elections and ignore problems like these, which are much bigger.
Looking for a lighter side as the problems pile up, a TV show has turned the real-life soap opera of Ukrainian politics into parody. The characters, modelled on the country's leaders, live precariously together in a Soviet-style communal apartment. They gang up on one another, there are love affairs, and there are breakups. The laughs come from sharing a common space and learning to get along.
People are tired of politics and the wars between the parties. It's important to make fun of it so that people don't take it too seriously.
They say it's the best medicine. For Ukraine's weary voters facing an uncertain election, laughter may not be the cure. Jonah, Al Jazeera, Kiev, in Ukraine.
Well, if the predictions of pre-vote polls are to be believed, the outcome of Sunday's elections will see the bloc led by Viktor Yanukovych winning the most votes.
It's an extraordinary comeback for a man who was accused of helping rig the vote in 2004, which led to the so-called Orange Revolution. So why does he remain so popular, and could he be the man to end Ukraine's long political crisis? Lawrence Lee went on the campaign trail with Mr. Yanukovych.
If you want to get into the mind of a politician, it's often a good idea to see where they come from. And Viktor Yanukovych is firmly rooted in the coal mines of eastern Ukraine. In his hometown, the support is reverential. The museum has his life story, the orphan who rose through the ranks to become prime minister and yet remain one of the people. This woman, an old friend, told us his great strength is managing the economy while keeping the common touch.
Even when he was young, they called him father. All the years I've known him, he cared for people. 20 years passed, and he still remembers all the people he worked with.
After a post-Soviet meltdown, things here have improved. 100% employment, people being paid on time. Here, Viktor Fyodorovich Yanukovych can rely on 98% of the vote. Mr. Yanukovych invited Al Jazeera to travel with him away from the east into enemy territory. Not much of anything here, let alone industry. This is the rural west, the heartland of pro-European Ukraine. The first town we landed in was called Sani, population 35,000. We asked people what they did for work. Nothing, they said. The Yanukovych roadshow tried to warm them up with some traditional songs, but some in the crowd, like this old lady, admitted to simply coming along to watch the concert because there was nothing else to do. And then he arrived, the most popular politician in Ukraine, all razzmatazz and bouffant hair, pressing all the nationalist buttons, condemning what he called the lies of the politicians who had promised democracy and yet had left them in poverty. The support wasn't exactly rapturous, but it wasn't bad either.
The Yanukovych message essentially is that he is Ukraine's great patriot, the only man who can bring together a fractured country and keep relations tight with Russia to the east and the European Union to the west. Actually, it's exactly the same message that he had 3 years ago. It's just that this time around, the delivery, the choreography are that much more polished.
And so it went on, by helicopter, accompanied by hordes of press staff and managers, by road convoy at breakneck speed. In town after town, exactly the same. He'd learned all the PR tricks from his great opponent, Viktor Yushchenko, and was using them against him. And underneath all the glad handing and promises of a better life, the crucial message to the outside world: I am the only man who can do business with both Russia and Europe.
We're aiming to be a trustworthy partner, a bridge between Europe and Russia. Stability in Ukraine means our country will keep its promises to Europe and means we can be trusted in the export and transit of energy supplies.
Back in the industrial east, the machines keep on rolling. Ukraine should be on the perfect place on the map. Markets in Russia and Europe, transport by sea. This Pakistani-owned venture exports almost 90% of what it makes. And do they think Yanukovych is a Soviet throwback? Not at all.
He is not against the industrialization and capitalization of this country. I think it's a little bit wrong perception. Whichever leadership comes in this country will have to develop the industry, because Ukraine is a very industrialized country. Only a lot of modernization is required, and Yanukovych policies have been towards that.
What you make of Yanukovych largely seems to depend on what side of the world you live on, and there are many untruths. But even if he did help rig the vote in 2004, even if he did want to send the tanks onto the streets of Kiev, the Ukraine of 2007 can't do business without him. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera, in Ukraine.